Good evening. My name is Yoshi Silverstein. I'm a landscape architect, a Jewish educator, a lover of books, and an explorer of place. As a young child, I was fortunate to attend a Montessori school that was housed in an arboretum. We were preschoolers, so inside the classroom, we used the classic Montessori building blocks to build preschool-level towers of Babel with all the hubris of 4-year-olds. And then we would sit quietly as teachers read stories to us. But then when we went outside the classroom, the world came alive, and the works of some of our favorite authors like J.R.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis suddenly became that much more vibrant in the arboretum as we climbed on the boughs of the giant old oak tree or hid behind the curtain of branches formed by the weeping willow down by the duck pond. I continued with Montessori into elementary school. And when the question came of whether to attend the supplemental Hebrew school at my temple, I was initially reluctant. My older sister hadn't gone, and it just didn't really seem relevant, so I held off. That changed one day when a Jewish friend and classmate of mine came into school, and he said, "Josh," as I was known then, "you've got to see what we did in Hebrew school last night." So he pulled out a piece of paper and a pen, and he wrote in Hebrew the words, doo-doo. Needless to say, I was hooked. I went home immediately that night and I said, "Mom, you've got to sign me up for Hebrew school. It's the coolest thing ever." So she did. I began the next year and I caught up with the assistance of a tutor. And at age 13, I read Torah for my bar mitzvah. And now, some 20 plus years later, here I am on stage at the Jewish Theological Seminary in Manhattan, thousands of miles away from my hometown of Spokane, Washington. Just goes to show the power of a few well-timed Hebrew words. Sefer Yetzirah, the book of formation, tells us that in the beginning, when God spoke the world into being, God used 22 elemental letters of creation. With these letters, God carved them, weighed them, permuted them, transposed them, and with them formed and everything destined to be formed. These letters of creation are the atoms that bind the molecular sentences together that form everything in the universe. Judaism places quite a premium on well-designed combinations of letters and words. Take, for example, the blessings that we recite daily. I taught one such blessing to a group of third graders on a Jewish farm at the Pearlstone Center in Reisterstown, Maryland, a few years ago. Pearlstone is a place where modern sustainable farming practices are engaged in dialogue with Jewish farming traditions of the ancient past. So there we were, standing on this farm, and I taught them the blessing that ends, Mechayeh Hametim. It praises God for bringing forth life from the dead. Usually we find this blessing in the Amidah. But that day on the farm, I was applying a teaching I had learned from a teacher of mine, and I suggested to the students that we apply this blessing to compost. A bit untraditional, sure, but fitting for a process in which nutrients that once sustained life are reclaimed and made available to sustain future life and future growth. So we said the blessing, we got buckets of compost, and we walked them over to the children's garden, where raised planting beds had been formed in the shape of a human figure, an Adam from the Adamah. And there I told these students the story of another human figure formed from the clay, the Golem of Prague. I told them how the Maharal, the great mystic Rabbi Yehuda Loeb ben Betzalel, used his fantastic powers and knowledge of Kabbalah and the letters of creation to raise a being formed from the earth through inscribing 3 Hebrew letters on its forehead, Aleph, Mem, and Tav, spelling the word emet, truth. And when the Golem's work was done, the Maharal removed the Aleph from his forehead, leaving behind the word met, death. So then, looking at our own human creature on the ground, I said, I'm going to inscribe those 3 letters on the forehead of this creature right here. And if you join me by concentrating all of your power and focus on this place, this makom, then maybe, just maybe, we can bring to life our very own golem of Reisterstown. Some farms use draft horses for labor. We could have our very own golem. So we gathered close, and I wrote those 3 letters on the forehead: Aleph, Mem, and Tav. And nothing happened. Suffice to say, neither I nor my students have quite attained the levels of mystical power and knowledge as the Maharal. Never fear, though, I told them, because there are other ways that we can bring forth life from the earth. So we dug holes in the soil, and we planted seeds. We covered them, we watered them in, and we gave those seeds a kavanah, an intention that they may grow strong and healthy and sustain the people in our community. That day on the farm, we had an experience of place that integrated life cycles and nutrient cycles with Jewish history, culture, and lore. We had an experience in which we let the earth teach us Torah, the Torah of place. In his book, Palimpsests, urban geographer Paul Knox applies the concept of palimpsest to the urban landscape. A palimpsest is a manuscript upon which layers of old text and images can still be seen and read underneath newer layers. So here we can see a palimpsest from the ancient world, from Archimedes, and a modern palimpsest from the streets of India. Palimpsest, as it applies to landscape, refers to the diverse ecological and cultural processes whose interactions are left behind as layers embedded in the landscape. So here we see ripples that have been engraved in the ecological palimpsest of a riverbed. Landscape, therefore, is a layered manuscript, and it can be explored and studied. It can be read and interpreted. Landscape is Torah. It's the Torah of place, whose scriptures are comprised of the letters of creation, words of wisdom embodied in the places where Jewish people and communities live. So, how do we apply the wisdom of the Torah of place? We apply it through developing a practice of place that integrates learning and exploring and design. This won't just happen overnight, though. Just as it takes years of practice and study to attain even basic fluency in traditional written Torah, developing this practice will require a commitment from Jewish people and communities and institutions to developing a consistent and long-lasting relationship to place. Luckily, though, we have existing pedagogical models of Jewish learning that can inform how we go about this process. Every week, Jews read Parshat HaShavua, the weekly Torah portion. What would it look like to augment this with Parshat HaMakom, the Parsha of place? This week, we read the Parsha of Lech Lecha. In Lech Lecha, God tells Abraham, "Go forth, Lech Lecha, from the land of your fathers to a land which I will show you." So after reading Lech Lecha from the Torah, we might then go forth ourselves into our own landscapes. We would put ourselves in a state of openness and vulnerability similar to that which Sarah and Abraham experienced themselves. What would be the gleanings of knowledge that we would receive through exploring the Torah of place in this way? And what insights would this give us to the experiences of Abraham and Sarah so many thousands of years ago? This practice of place allows us to connect to the experiences of our ancestors in the Jewish past, and at the same time create new Jewish experiences that are meaningful for us today. Sefer Yetzirah also tells us something interesting about Abraham's relationship to place. It tells us that God first noticed Abraham because Abraham was able to perform the same operations with the letters of creation. Abraham carved them and weighed them, transposed them, permuted them. Abraham was a designer, a co-creator of the world. And so we shouldn't be surprised that Abraham charted a new path forward, because design focuses our vision on the future. Design catalyzes the application of Jewish knowledge and values into creating physical space in the world that embodies the values we hold dear as Jewish people. An example of this happened just a few weeks ago, and I'm betting many of you actually took part in this. Just a few weeks ago, Jews around the world designed and built sukkahs. The sukkah is a physical representation of the values of the holiday of Sukkot, the values of gathering together to celebrate with family and friends, to be joyful, to sing, and to pray, of welcoming in strangers, of being hospitable, and of making ourselves a little bit closer to the natural world through spending time in the sukkah, through sleeping in the sukkah, seeing the stars at night, and even feeling drops of rain on our foreheads through the skach. Sukkot is a fully realized, three-dimensional Jewish experience in which we not only retell the experiences of our ancestors and their stories, we actually relive them and we make them meaningful for us today. So through design, through looking at all Jewish spaces and thinking about how they can be designed for Jewish learning and exploration and gathering, for these Jewish experiences of place, we can apply Jewish values and Jewish wisdom to the places around us. The good news is you don't have to be a professionally trained designer to take part in this process. So tonight, I encourage you to go forth, lech lecha, into your place, your backyard or the nearest park. Not only learn what makes that place special, but create. Gather some sticks and some stones and build a micro playground for ants or potato bugs. Build, observe, play, and create. To paraphrase Pirkei Avot, it may not be up to us to complete the task of building the world we want to live in, but neither are we free to desist from these holy acts of creation. Thank you very much.
Thanks for watching Eli Talks. Click through or subscribe to the Eli Talks channel for more inspired Jewish ideas.